Week 6 is officially upon us. We just witnessed an upset on Thursday Night Football with the Giants defeating the Philadelphia Eagles. And in today's video, I'm going to help you guys set your lineup at the wide receiver position. We're going to be going in depth through my top 40 wide receiver rankings and tiers for week number 6 of the 2025 fantasy football season. Before we could get into things, though, I would like to ask that if you are new to the channel and you don't enjoy today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with the must-start wide receiver ones. My wide receivers 1 through 12: Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Emeka Egbuka, Rome Odunze, Drizzy Drake London, George Pickens, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, as well as Cortland Sutton. Now, Puka Nacua at this point in the season just needs to be ranked as the wide receiver 1. I don't care about the matchup at all going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Definitely does feel like a good matchup, though, and it is a good matchup on paper, the third best matchup for the wide receiver position. Puka Nacua has been as consistent as it gets this season, a top 6 wide receiver every single game. This is a guy that does it without even being a massive touchdown hog in this offense. He has scored 3 total touchdowns on the year. Still, though, even without being a primary red zone weapon on the team, just like I've been saying, he is as consistent as it gets. I wish I was higher on Puka Nacua this summer. I liked Malik Neighbors instead of him. I wish I was more on the Puka Nacua train, because as a Puka Nacua stand from day one, this dude is nothing short of impeccable. At number 2, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, just like Puka Nacua, Amon-Ra St. Brown is as consistent as it gets, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City this week. In terms of a matchup, on paper, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs is far from ideal at the wide receiver position. But again, when it's a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, we don't care at all. Outside of week 1 up against the Green Bay Packers, where the offense as a whole was relatively limp dick, he's been the wide receiver 1, 7, 4, and 15 over the last 4 games. Again, as consistent as it gets in what might be the highest scoring game of the week, you want Amon-Ra St. Brown in your lineup. Next up, we got Jackson Smith-Njigba going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Duval. Now, when it comes to JSN, just like the other 2 guys that we've talked about thus far, these guys are the definition of consistency. You open up the Webster's dictionary, there's a picture of Puka, Amon-Ra, and JSN next to the word consistency. In terms of matchup, this is a slightly above middle of the road matchup for the wide receiver position. JSN had just 1 slip up this season, and he was the wide receiver 25 in that game. Top 13 wide receiver every single other game. Last week, he was the wide receiver 3 up against the Bucs at home in Seattle. So again, with all 3 of these guys, I don't need to sit here and spend a million hours fucking glazing these dudes. They have really been that good, and if you have them on your team, you already have admired the greatness that is these 3 wide receivers. Next up, we got Emeka Egbuka going up against the 49ers. No Chris Godwin this week, so we are going to be getting a healthy dosage of Emeka Egbuka, and even when Mike Evans does end up returning, this is Emeka Egbuka's job as the wide receiver 1, going up against the San Francisco 49ers this week. In terms of a matchup, it is a below middle of the road matchup, but we did just see last week how well the LA Rams offense performed up against that defense, how well Puka Nacua did. So Emeka Egbuka has came out the gate on fire of his NFL career, coming off of the wide receiver 1 performance up against the Seahawks with 7 receptions on 7 targets for 163 yards and a touchdown. This guy has scored a grand total of 5 touchdowns on the season through 5 games. Again, as much of a condom wrap at the wide receiver position as it gets. Next up, we got Rome Odunze of the Chicago Bears going up against the left hands up. Who are we? The Commanders in Washington this week. In terms of a matchup, this is a top 15 matchup at the wide receiver position, the 13th best matchup on a per game basis at the wide receiver position. Now, all throughout the summer, we talked about how Rome wasn't built in a day, right? I understand that Rome Odunze's rookie year was far from ideal, but Ben Johnson was going to hit him with a quick revive like it's Call of Duty Zombies, shout out to Takio, and things were going to work, and that is exactly how this season has gone. 4 straight games inside of the top 20. He has scored a touchdown or more in every single game. 4 games played, 5 total touchdowns in a matchup up against the Commanders. That could be a certified shootout. I love Rome Odunze this week. Next up, we got Drizzy Drake London going up against the Buffalo Bills at home in Hotlanta. Now, the start of this season for Drake London definitely has not been the best, right? And as a Drake London truther, I'm not even going to come on here and pretend like it's been all sunshine and rainbows for Drake London. He's got a matchup here that is far from ideal, but Drake London is one of the biggest pieces of this Atlanta Falcons offense. In terms of the hierarchy, one is either Bijan, and so it's basically just 1A, 1B. Bijan Robinson and Drizzy Drake London. He got hurt earlier on in the year, but now he's a couple weeks removed from that AC joint sprain. He was the wide receiver 5 prior to the bye week up against the Commanders. 8 receptions on 10 targets for 110 yards and a touchdown. If Michael Penix can truly figure things out, then the ceiling is the moon for Drake London this season. And up against the Buffalo Bills, they're going to be down more than likely. They're going to have to be throwing themselves into this game, and Drake London is going to be very, very involved. Next up, we got GP George Pickens going up against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. Shout out to Sir Purr. In terms of matchup at the wide receiver position, this is actually one of the bottom 2 matchups at the wide receiver position, but we did just see Jaylen Waddle get loose up against them last week and hit him with a 5-knuckle shuffle. George Pickens was a disappointment last week up against the Jets as they were beating the ever-living shit out of the Jets. So they didn't really need to throw the ball to George Pickens a ton. He had 2 receptions on 4 targets for 57 yards and a touchdown. As the wide receiver 24, Ryan Flournoy, who the fuck is that guy, was the lead wide receiver on the team last week. He has scored at least 1 touchdown over the last 4 games and has 5 total touchdowns over that stretch. Until CeeDee Lamb returns, George Pickens belongs in the top 12 at the wide receiver position. And if the Carolina Panthers can keep this one competitive, then George Pickens could end up being the wide receiver 1. I could see all of the wide receivers inside the top 12 finishing as the wide receiver 1 on the week. Next up, we got Garrett Wilson of the New York Jumbo Jets going up against the Denver Broncos in London, baby. Tottenham Spurs Stadium. Fucking 9:30 in the morning Eastern Standard Time, baby. Can't wait to wake up and watch the Jumbo Jets, baby. 4 touchdowns on the season, 3 straight games with the touchdown, 3 straight top 12 finishes, 4 of 5 games inside the top 12. Say what you want about Justin Fields. Say what you want about how the Jets offense is completely and utterly limp dick and in need of a Cialis. Say all that because I agree with it, but in the 3rd quarter, in the 4th quarter, this offense rises like a phoenix. This is an offense that dominates in garbage time. Shout out to Blake Bortles. Garrett Wilson could be doing diddly squat for the first 3 quarters of the game, and you already know he's going to have 2 fantasy points. He's turning that shit into 25. In the 4th quarter, he is the garbage time king. Give him a crown. Going up against the Denver Broncos, Patrick Surtain, it's scary. I get it. I'm not going to act like this is the picture-perfect matchup for a wide receiver, but with Garrett Wilson, I don't care. Next up, we got Davante Adams going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Like we said earlier when we talked about Puka Nacua, this is one of the best matchups at the wide receiver position. Davante Adams has been struggling a bit more compared to Puka Nacua. Davante Adams has had some crazy drops where it's like normally Davante Adams would have caught that. Seems like sometimes him and Matthew Stafford aren't necessarily on the same page, but he's on an offense that's a wagon in one of the best matchups for the wide receiver position and has been a top 24 wide receiver every single week except for his debut with the LA Rams. 3 touchdowns through 5 games. You know Davante Adams lives inside of the end zone. So while the floor is definitely a little bit lower than Puka Nacua, I do believe they have the exact same ceiling. And again, wet dream matchup for Davante Adams. Next up, we got Jamar Chase going up against the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay. In terms of a matchup at the wide receiver position, this is a middle of the road matchup. Now, let's see how this offense looks with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco on the Cleveland Browns looked not very good in my opinion. Below very good for sure. The offensive line in Cincinnati might get 2 guys named Joe fucking slimed out in this offense, murdered, put on a t-shirt. So I am pretty concerned about that. But Jamar Chase is kind of just one of these guys where we have seen some very low lows this season. We've seen some very high highs. You don't turn your back on Jamar Chase. He was the wide receiver 2 last week, 6 receptions on 10 targets for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns up against the Detroit Lions. He was the wide receiver 3 back in week number 2. I get there is very clear risk. He could just as easily score 8 fantasy points as he could 30 fantasy points, but the upside is far too significant to sit him. And it feels like Joe Flacco is the kind of guy that just realizes, hey, I'm going to have literally half of a second to throw the football. Just a millisecond to throw the ball. I'm just going to keep throwing it to Jamar Chase, and then Jamar Chase is going to end up eating, so I definitely want him in my lineup. Next up, we got Deebo Samuel of the Washington Commanders going up against the Chicago Bears. Deebo Samuel currently listed as questionable, so that is something to follow. But he did not practice on Thursday, but he's a veteran. Rest day. No one should be worrying about that. He is dealing with a minor heel injury, though. Just something to follow. The game is on Monday Night Football, the second of 2 Monday Night Football games. No Terry McLaurin. Deebo Samuel has been Mr. Reliable so far this season, which has just been the complete opposite of his career arc. Even when Deebo Samuel was on top of the world, Deebo was still pretty inconsistent. This year has been the exact opposite. Outside of a shitter up against the LA Rams, he's been a top 17 wide receiver every single other week, top 7 last week. Again, I talked about this, the Bears matchup. Going up against the Bears for the Commanders might be the highest scoring game of the week, so you gotta love Mr. Deebo. Next up, we got Courtland Sutton going up against the New York Jumbo Jets in London. Now, the Jets' defense on paper is very good. They have the players on defense. They've got Sauce Gardner, and on paper, they might be menacing. But we say this all the time. Football is not played on paper. It is played on the gridiron. It's played on the field. And on the field, the Jets defense gets fucking cream pied on the weekly. This is a middle-of-the-road matchup for the wide receiver position. Courtland Sutton has been as reliable as it gets so far this season outside of one bad game up against the Indianapolis Colts, top 16 wide receiver every other game. He has been as high as the wide receiver 3 up against the Chargers in week number 3. Again, a guy you feel very, very safe about being in your lineup. Now we pivot to tier number 2, the must-start high-end wide receiver 2. Sure, these are guys that aren't technically at the apex to be ranked inside the top 12, but if they finished inside the top 12, no one would be surprised. Michael Pittman Jr., Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle away, Waddle, Tedero McMillan, Xavier Worthy, as well as Quentin Johnston. Before we break down the rest of the wide receivers in today's video, though, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you'll receive a free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as if you play $5 in the pick'em, you'll receive an additional $100 in bonus funds or in bonus entries. Make sure you guys do check that out, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. If you don't know how the pick'em works, it is incredibly simple. You pick at least 2 players. If the higher or the lower hits, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher, but all of the picks have to hit, so make sure you guys do check that out, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, Michael Pittman Jr. is a guy that I kind of avoided this summer. I was on the Josh Downs bandwagon. I was banging the drum for Josh Downs, despite the fact that deep down in my loins, I have been a Michael Pittman Jr. truther for years. I wish I was more on his bandwagon this summer because things have looked very good for him. The Indianapolis Colts offense is downright incredible. The offensive line's a brick wall. Daniel Jones looks like just a completely different man now in Indianapolis. And now they're going up against a Arizona Cardinals defense that is coming off of an L to Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans. Mainly, though, a game that they lost, not because Cam Ward came alive, had that rookie game that we've all been waiting for, mainly because they just wounded themselves in that game. Middle-of-the-road matchup for Michael Pittman Jr., outside of one game up against the Denver Broncos, where he had to go up against such a tough defense, he has been a top 22 wide receiver every single other week, so he should be considered as a high-end wide receiver too, going forward, especially in positive matchups, or at least middle-of-the-road matchups like this one. Next up, we got Stephon Diggs going up against the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans. Now, Stephon Diggs was a guy, unlike Michael Pittman Jr., that I was given the gawk 9,000 special to. I was banging the drum all summer long for Stephon Diggs, and things come out the gate looking as slow as it gets. It looks like he's running in molasses. He's not getting the correct amount of snaps. Week 1, wide receiver 31, wide receiver 70, then the wide receiver 66, and then after that, wide receiver 18 and 4. Over the last 2 weeks, it is very clear that he is now 100% healthy. That injury from Houston is behind him, and he is the clear wide receiver one, the clear head honcho in this offense. Him and Drake May have a 5G LTE connection. Last week, he got his revenge up against the Buffalo Bills, 10 receptions on 12 targets for 146 yards as the wide receiver 4. If this guy can just get into the end zone one time, he has the upside to be the wide receiver 1. My only worry in this matchup is not that I think the Saints have the best defense in the NFL. This is a below average matchup for the wide receiver position, but it really is just that if the Patriots are up by so many points, they might slow things down. But if you think about it, if they are up by so many points, it's probably because Stephon Diggs had a great day. Next up, we got Jalen Waddle away. Waddle going up against the LA Superchargers. No Tyreek Hill, no fucking problem for Jalen Waddle as the wide receiver 8 last week up against the Panthers. 6 receptions on 9 targets for 110 yards and a touchdown. Going up against the LA Chargers is definitely a matchup that is very concerning for wide receivers, so I do deep down worry about that. But since outside of Jalen Waddle, the next best target is Darren Waller, who's actually been very good, but outside that, they've got like Malik Washington, Nick Westbrook, Cain. The ball's going to be going to Jalen Waddle a ton, so while the matchup is concerning, I think the volume will overwhelm that, and he will still have a high-end wide receiver 2 finish. Next up, we got Tetairoa McMillan. Now, there's going to be people in the comment section, Nick, you keep talking up Tetairoa McMillan, and Nick, do you even watch football because Tetairoa McMillan still hasn't had a good game? I agree with you. He hasn't had a good game. Or a great game, I guess, right? He's had good games, not a great game. Problem isn't Tetairoa McMillan. If you watch the games, you will see Tetairoa McMillan is getting open. Tetairoa McMillan is making great catches. His hands have the grip strength of the fucking Hulk, okay? So Tetairoa McMillan looks good. It's all about him and Bryce Young getting on the same page and Bryce Young playing better. Now, if there ever was a game on paper to break out, I get it would have been last week up against the Dolphins where he was 6 of 8 for 73 yards. Xavier Legette scored. I don't think that's going to end up happening again. I think the game to break out here is up against the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys defense would let you score 25 plus fantasy points against them. The Dallas Cowboys defense cannot stop the wide receiver position. They are the best matchup on paper for wide receivers. So with Tetairoa McMillan looking good and just kind of knocking on the door of having that big game, I think it's coming this week. I want to rank him higher than this. I want to rank him as a must-start top 12 option, and he is a must-start option, but can't quite get him inside the top 12 because, again, deep down, I still worry that he's just going to be kind of mid as he's been this whole season. Next up, we got Professor Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Detroit Lions, dealing with a shoulder and ankle injury. My interpretation would be that he does end up playing on Sunday night. He did practice fully on Wednesday, missed practice on Thursday, but again, I guess Xavier Worthy isn't technically like a fucking veteran. He hasn't done 4 tours across the NFL. But if Xavier Worthy's a little bit banged up, they don't need to force him to practice on Thursday for a Sunday night game. Xavier Worthy is one of those guys that has a very high ceiling, and based on the fact that Rashee Rice isn't back yet, he has a relatively decent floor as well. He was the wide receiver 37 last week. The week prior, he was the wide receiver 16 in what could be the highest scoring game of the week up against the Detroit Lions, what I would personally expect the highest scoring game of the week to be. I know we talked about other games that could be high scoring. This is the one that I think will be the highest scoring. Xavier Worthy, the upside is way too high to rank him any lower than this. Next up, we got Quentin Johnston to close out this tier going up against the Dolphins in Miami. Dale dealing with a hamstring injury. My expectation is that he would be good to go, but I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, so you want to make sure that you monitor these things. You don't just take exactly what I say as the truth when it comes to injuries, because things change very quickly. You might think a guy's going to play, and then you get fucking hit with the front hand, backhand, like that Key and Peele sketch, and then the guy's out, right? So you never want to just say these things are 100% certain. Going up against the Dolphins defense, though, I am 100% certain is a wet dream matchup. I understand that if you go ahead and look at the metrics that I use, like fantasy points against at the wide receiver position, the Dolphins are actually a great defense for that, but I watch the games. I watch every Dolphins game. It's basically like torture at this point. Like I'm stuck in the fucking electric chair and I can't get out because I refuse to not watch the team. I refuse to not watch my favorite team. I wait all year for the 17 weeks of the Miami Dolphins just for them to give me straight up face fucking for 17 straight games. It is so disappointing every single year, but I watch every single game And I will tell you, the Miami Dolphins secondary is trash. Quentin Johnston shit the bed last week. Now, this is something that we have been kind of talking about all season. It really seemed like Ladd was falling out of favor, but you kind of knew deep down eventually one of those guys, not named Ladd, was going to be a gigantic bust, and last week that was Quentin Johnston. I still do believe, though, the most in Quentin Johnston in this offense. I know I shouldn't because of what Quentin Johnston has been throughout his career, but a top 23 wide receiver over the first 4 games of the season, 2 top 6 finishes, he deserves to be ranked this high, even despite shitting the bed in the game last week. Next up, we move on into the third tier, which is going to be the rest of the wide receiver 2s with Keenan Allen, DK Metcalf, BTJ, Maserati, Marvin Harrison Jr., Ladd McConkey, as well as Chris Olave. Now, Keenan Allen has been on a bit of a downward spiral over the last 2 weeks. Starts off the season as a wide receiver 10, 18, and 12 in full PPR. The next 2 weeks, wide receiver 43. Last week, wide receiver 40. But again, the Dolphins defense is just live to get straight up destroyed. So Keenan Allen looks great to start off the season. Still very involved, 7+ targets every single week. Didn't get as lucky with the touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, but as a Dolphins fan, I already know Keenan Allen's going to go crazy against us. Next up, we got DK Metcalf going up against the Cleveland Browns. DK Metcalf, prior to the bye, had his best game of the season as the wide receiver 7. 5 receptions on 5 targets for 126 yards in Ireland, and a touchdown as the wide receiver number 7. 3 straight games with a touchdown, and while this isn't really the season I expected out of DK Metcalf, because I expected DK Metcalf to be reliable, because he was just going to get 7 targets at plus every single game, because Aaron Rodgers was going to laser eyes lock onto him like one of those old school launchers that were back in, what were those called? Like in Modern Warfare 2, where you would lock onto like the Pavlo and shoot it down so you didn't get a fucking nuke dropped on your ass. DK Metcalf, I thought, was going to be locked onto by Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was going to feed him the rock. That hasn't really been the case because Arthur Smith's a fucking idiot. And despite the fact that the talent at the wide receiver position is severely diminished after DK Metcalf, he doesn't get force-fed the ball. But he's been reliable this year, over 11 PPR points every single week. I get that's far from exciting, and that's far from what I expected out of him. But based on what we saw before the bye week, maybe we see more connections with Rodgers and Metcalf going forward. In terms of a matchup up against the Cleveland Browns at the wide receiver position, this is a top 12 matchup, so hopefully DK Metcalf keeps that hot streak going. I like him this week. Next up, we got BTJ going up against the Seattle Seahawks at home in Jacksonville. Now, for the first 3 weeks of the season, we've talked about this a lot, but BTJ and Trevor Lawrence were not on the same page. They were not in the same book. They were not in the same genre, not in the same Dewey Decimal System. One guy was in one library. The other dude was in a library 3 straights over, right? It was unbelievable how bad things were. It was almost like they didn't practice with each other throughout the summer. It's almost like they didn't play with each other, last year. But over the last 2 weeks, sure, have things been fantastic? Of course not. No, they haven't. He's been the wide receiver 31, the wide receiver 30, but the connection itself looked stronger. It wasn't like in week 1 where he gets 7 targets but 1 catch. Week 2 up against the Bengals where he has 4 receptions on 12 targets. The next week where he has 2 receptions on 6 targets. 5 receptions on 7 targets in week 4. 4 receptions on 6 targets in week number 5. I believe that BTJ and Trevor Lawrence's connection getting better just means that we are on the precipice of that big game. Frankly, the wide receiver position at this point in the season feels very up in the air, very fluid. A lot of quarterback injuries. Teams on bye this week. So while I am not in love with having to start BTJ, it's hard to sit him, especially with the connection that was developed, as well as the fact that this game could be a shootout due to how great the Seahawks offense looks. And the Jaguars offense has been a big surprise this season, that despite the fact that Trevor Lawrence and BTJ really haven't been on the same page, Travis Hunter been basically irrelevant, the team as a whole has looked very, very good offensively. In terms of a matchup, this is a slightly below average matchup for the wide receiver position. So again, I don't love BTJ. I wouldn't bet my life that he has a huge game, but I do think better days are ahead. Next up, we got Maserati Marv going up against the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis. It would appear that Kyler Murray should be good to go in this game. Again, something to monitor, as if Jacoby Brissett is in, I would drop him like it's hot down my rankings. Maserati Marv has been a top 24 wide receiver in back-to-back games, and I don't think after just 2 solid games, we should be oogling and ogling over Marvin Harrison Jr., that we should be giving him the Sukalamink special. But it is much more promising compared to what we saw in weeks 2 and week 3. And he also came out the gate of the season as the wide receiver 13. So, better games than worse games this season. More better games than more worse games this season. Great matchup up against the Colts on paper, the 6th best matchup for wide receivers. So, while I do still have my reservations, my nervousness with Marvin Harrison Jr., you're still going to play him. Next up, we got the Lad McConkey, going up against the Miami Dolphins in Miami. Last week was finally the game we've all been waiting for. Shout out to Bruce Buffer. I was waiting all of last Saturday to see Alex Pereira versus Ankalaev, and Powhatan sent that bitch to the Shadow Realm. Obviously, he didn't actually knock him out. It was a TKO, but if Herb Dean just let him clobber him, it was clobbering time. Shout out to the Fantastic Four. For a couple more seconds, I think Ank was going to be sleeping with the fishes. And honestly, the fact that the Dolphins suck absolute dick, at least I got that win, baby. At least Powhatan won. Thank God. And if you guys ever noticed during the videos, I wear a Shama shirt, basically. Like, if I'm not wearing a Dolphin shirt, I'm rocking a Shama shirt. I fucking love Alex Pereira. He's my favorite UFC fighter. Literally one of the greatest, in my opinion, of all time. Definitely one of the greatest I've ever seen outside of John Jones, but that dude's a steroid head. A pea head, yeah. All right, Lad McConkey. Again, one great week. A lot of not-so-hot weeks. One of these guys every single week is going to bust. And 2 of the other guys will probably have good games. Kind of just spin the wheel. And going up against the Dolphins defense, you just want to be playing all of them. Next up, we got Chris Olave. Now, Chris Olave is as unexciting as it gets. You put Chris Olave in your lineup, and you kind of just know what you're going to get. You're going to get 10 to 16 points. And by the grace of the fantasy gods, if Olave scores and Spencer Rattler is dialed in, maybe he could be a top 18 option. But more than likely, just a low-end wide receiver 2 to high-end wide receiver 3 that just keeps getting it done for you. And again, it's not exciting, but you're not losing because you drafted Chris Olave, right? You're losing because of other players on your team, or because you expected far too much out of Chris Olave and you reached up a couple rounds to draft him. This is a good matchup at the wide receiver position, the 10th best matchup. We just saw Stephon Diggs hit him from the back. How you like that last week? So again, while my excitement level definitely is pretty low for Chris Olave, he may be one of the safest players inside of this tier. Now we move on into the 4th tier, which is going to be a conglomerate of my wide receiver 3s. In this tier, we had A.J. Brown, who already played, so we're not going to sit there and talk about A.J. Brown for an hour. I cannot believe that the Philadelphia Eagles lost to the Giants in that big of a fashion. Sure, if the Giants beat the Eagles, I don't think anyone would have been crazy surprised if it was like a 3-point win, but this was pure domination on the night they dropped the Saquon Barkley documentary. I mean, they were just kind of cruising for a bruising. A.J. Brown looks good. Jalen Hurts just looks like dog shit. I mean, let's just be honest. Let's be honest. I don't think I said this on Twitter. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback get carried quite like Jalen Hurts. I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is like so bad, but it's like he's missing so many throws, and like the only way the offense is moving in the red zone is when they're tush pushing him, and they're literally cheating on the tush push because of all the false starts. We're not going to spend a year talking about A.J. Brown. That's why we don't include these players in the video, but I thought A.J. Brown himself looked good, or just on Jalen Hurts being bad. Calvin Ridley, Juwan Jennings, Jacoby Myers, Devontae Smith also in this tier, Zay Flowers, Khalil, Shakira, Wan'Dale Robinson, who played, Kendrick Bourne, as well as Wiki, DJ Moore. So Calvin Ridley going up against the Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. Calvin Ridley is coming off of his best game of the year by far. 5 receptions on 10 targets for 131 yards up against the Cardinals in Arizona as the wide receiver 14. Is that just one Fugazi game? Maybe, maybe not. We shall see, which is why I don't have him ranked higher here, because I would like, as someone that was a Calvin Ridley truther all summer, to just be like, okay, he's back after one game. Let's fucking throw him as a high-end wide receiver too. He has a great matchup this week, the 4th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. But I'll pump the brakes a little bit because, again, it was just one game. Next up, we got Juwan Jennings going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. Currently listed as questionable. He was limited in practice on Thursday with the ankle and the ribs. You got to follow that. No Ricky Pearsall. Going to be Juwan Jennings' season. Seems like Brock Purdy will not be the starter and will be Mac Jones. But again, still something to monitor as I don't have the practice report for the 49ers on Friday just yet. Jauan Jennings has reached strong heights. Top 12 wide receiver back in week 2. Up against the Jacksonville Jaguars last time out. Not as hot, but the guy's been banged up. He's been injured. Up against the Buccaneers, though, we do know that the Buccaneers defense really ain't all that great, so this could end up being a higher scoring game. Mid-range matchup at the wide receiver position. If Jauan Jennings is the wide receiver 1 and Mac Jones is the quarterback 1, you know Mac Jones loves Mr. Jauan Jennings. Next up, we got Jakobi Meyers of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Tennessee Titans. Now, I honestly don't even think I should yell that for Jakobi Meyers at this point because Geno Smith is nothing short of dog shit. Geno Smith is so bad that it is genuinely shocking. Geno, he's like Tua. He turned the ball over. Geno, turn the ball over. He deserves that nickname. Jakobi Meyers has gotten worse every single week. 18 fantasy points week 1 in PPR. That 13, 9, 7, and 7 over the last 2 weeks. Starts off the season on fire. Not so hot as of recently. I do believe that the Titans are a relatively underrated defense, but in terms of matchup, there's a top 12 matchup at the wide receiver position. I do think brighter days will be ahead for Jakobi Meyers, but after 3 straight, him basically pulling his pants off and shitting directly on your chest, how can you rank him higher than this? I mean, the matchup's great. He should be great, but how can you trust him more than this? Next up, we move to, this is where Devontae Smith would have been. Then we go to Zay Flowers. Now, Zay Flowers without Lamar Jackson, I mean, the upside is capped. The floor is much lower. The floor is lava. But he was the wide receiver 29 last week up against Houston when Houston, we had a problem. The Baltimore Ravens offense was inept without Lamar Jackson. No Lamar Jackson this week going up against the LA Rams in a game where they probably get their back blown out. So they're going to have to throw the ball late. Top 16 matchup for the wide receiver position. So I have my hopes for Zay Flowers. But ultimately, without Lamar Jackson, how can you rank him really any higher than this? Next up, we got Khalil Shakir going up against the Atlanta Falcons in Hotlanta. Khalil Shakir's another one of these guys like Chris Olave, where you're kind of just playing him because he's got a safe floor, but you're never really expecting him to, break the glass, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and have that Krakatoa, that explosion, that Mount Vesuvius volcanic explosion, like you're playing that Wii Sports Resort game and you fly into the volcano. You're not going to be expecting a volcanic explosion with a guy like Khalil Shakir. He might be the best wide receiver on the Bills. I'm not going to argue with you about that. But with limited touchdown upside, with Josh Allen kind of running an Oprah Winfrey offense, you get the ball, you get the ball, you all get the ball. Last week, he had 9 targets. I don't think we are as likely to see that, probably around the 6 range. Again, he's safe. He's a very, 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 very safe bet, but the upside is limited. And I think Chris Olave's upside is a little bit higher because, he could see 13 targets, and I wouldn't be shocked. If Khalil Shakir saw 13 targets against the Falcons, I would be very, very surprised. Next up, we move to Wan'Dale, who already played last night. Great game out of Mr. Wan'Dale Robinson. I was surprised by that performance. Wan'Dale has been one of these guys that we talk about kind of the same way as Shakir. Chris Olave, kind of one of those where, it's a disaster. You have to play him. It is what it is. You get your 10 to 15 points to get out of there. This season, though, he's had 2 games with over 20 points, and that's why we've been talking about him more positively as of recently. Frankly, though, I thought the Eagles' defense would play better than they did. Next up, we got Kendrick Bourne, the Bourne one, going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Kendrick Bourne was a guy that I really tried to pump the brakes on in my waiver wire ad video. He played so phenomenally up against the LA Rams. 10 receptions on 11 targets for 142 yards in prime time as the wide receiver 6 last week. But when we talk about the waivers on Monday, things are much more open, right? The idea that Ricky Pearsall and Jauan Jennings both would be back seemed logical at that point. I understand that George Kittle wasn't going to be back, but it seemed logical to believe that both Ricky Pearsall, Ricky Rolex, and Jauan Jennings would be back. So I said, you know what? Add Bourne if you want, but temper your expectations. Because if both those guys are back, Kendrick Bourne is going to be invisible. But Ricky Pearsall seemingly out, and if Jauan Jennings is out, which I don't think he will be, we would move up Kendrick Bourne even further, probably into the 3rd tier. He would go even ahead of where Jauan Jennings was ranked. Kendrick Bourne, as well as Mac Jones, have that connection dating back to New England. So Kendrick Bourne, fine option this week up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but you definitely need to, cool down a little bit, simmer down if you think he's going to be as good as last week. Next up, we got Wiki DJ Moore going up against the Washington Commanders. Now, for me, the biggest problem with DJ Moore, for one, he got his chain snatched, he got his job stolen as the wide receiver one in this offense, but this is a solid matchup, an above-average matchup, top 13 matchup at the wide receiver position, going up against the Commanders. This could be if Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams lock in one of those rock'em sock'em robots back and forth high-scoring affair matchups. So while DJ Moore has been just really he's bad at ADP, just kind of, wide receiver 3-ish, like flex range type of guy, the upside is still there for him. It's not like he's a terrible player. He's still good. It's just that, Rome Odunze is now ahead of him. Now we move on into the fifth and final tier here with the wide receiver 4s with Jameson Williams, Romeo Doubs, T. Higgins, Matthew Golden-Scar, Shahid, Rashid Shaheed, and Trey Tucker. Now, it absolutely breaks my heart that I have to rank Jameson Williams this low. Not because I was ever really a Jameson Williams truther. I never really was. But because Jameson Williams really got the fucking Gawk Gawk 9000 special, the two-hand Gawk Gawk spit special by the coaching staff in the summer. And now he's nowhere to be seen. Last week, he plays so many snaps and he gets one target and one rush. I mean, it's really shocking. Up against the Ravens too a few weeks ago, if you remember that primetime game, he's very involved in the first two drives. Then after that, he's invisible. He's had one game inside the top 12, every other game outside of the top 55. Up against the Chiefs, again, this should be the highest scoring game of the week. This should be the game where realistically Jameson Williams goes crazy. Jameson Williams drops sack as a top 12 wide receiver. On paper, though, this is a bad matchup. So, again, you're playing Jameson Williams because of the matchup. You're playing Jameson Williams because you acknowledge the upside that he possesses. You're not playing him because he is a safe option. Next up, we got Romeo Doubs going up against the Bengals. The Bengals defense is legitimately so terrible that it is genuinely shocking to watch at points this season just how bad the Bengals defense is in terms of matchup for wide receivers. They are a top 14 matchup. Now, honestly, I think that would be way better. But the thing is that when your defense is getting face-fucked early on in the game and you're down by 1 million points, what happens is the other team starts to run a lot. So they can't just score 1 million points with the wide receivers. Romeo Doubs coming off the bye week, the week prior up against Dallas in Jerry's World, the Micah Parsons revenge game that turned out to be a tie. 3 touchdowns in that game as the wide receiver 3. The upside is very high for him, but there's another one of those offenses where it's, you get the ball, check under your seat, you all get the ball. Shout out to Oprah Winfrey. As big as Oprah's bank account. Shout out to that song with Drake and Lil Bo. And I think Lil Baby was on that song. Or no, was it Dub? I think maybe it was Dub Baby, not Little Baby. Too many babies. Wham, wham, wham. Bitch, I'm a baby. Brand new whip, got no keys. Shout out to Pikachu. Romeo Doubs. Again, I like the matchup on paper, but he's not going to do as good as he did up against Dallas. And if they're up big, you're going to see a bunch of Josh Jacobs. So clearly risk. There's a lot of risk here. You don't really want to love being in this range at the wide receiver position. Next up, we got T. Higgins. Put Joe Flacco, revive him. Maybe, probably not. Best game of the season, second best game of the season last week up against the Lions. 3 receptions on 7 targets for 22 yards and a touchdown. You're kind of just praying to the fantasy gods above that he finds pay dirt. Matthew Golden going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Matthew Golden has kind of been like the if man this season, like Justin Herbert, right? If, Love hit him on a couple of these passes, if him and Love were on the same page a couple times, we're talking about Matthew Golden as the clear alpha wide receiver in Green Bay, but that didn't happen, so we're not, right? We're not talking about him that way. So, Matthew Golden, great matchup up against the Bengals. I love it. You're hoping he scores early. If he doesn't, you're probably disappointed, but back-to-back games inside the top 38, so he does have a higher floor at this point in the season. Next up, we move to Shahid, Rashid Shaheed. Rashid Shaheed's another one of those boring plays. in my opinion, but he does have big upside, but the upside is just so severely limited by the fact that Spencer Rattler just isn't that good. We had that vintage Shaheed game last week where he caught a fucking piss missile from Spencer Rattler, scored that touchdown, 114 total yards, 4 receptions, 5 targets. As the wide receiver 9, if they could rekindle this magic again this week up against the Patriots, it could be a big game, but you're probably looking at like 8 to 10 fantasy points realistically. Final guy in this tier is going to be Trey Tucker going up against the Tennessee Titans. Everyone was all over Trey Tucker after that game up against the Commanders. He follows that up from being the wide receiver 1 as the wide receiver 75. Scored 3 touchdowns in week 3, then scored just 4 fantasy points in week 4. And then after that, he follows that up as the wide receiver 38. He's going to get 6+ targets. Geno Smith is terrible. You're kind of just fighting on the fact here that Geno and him kind of have a good connection. So even though Geno reeks to high heaven, maybe Trey Tucker gets lucky enough to finish as a top 40 wide receiver. So again, once you get down here, it's like you really don't want to be relying on these guys. Obviously, the higher up you get, like the first 2 tiers, I mean, if you have 2 guys out of that, maybe 3 guys out of that, I mean, you're feeling like you're going to win every single week. And then the lower down you get, like in tier 3, you feel pretty solid, right? And then, you know, once you get into like tier 4, it's like, oh shit. And then in tier 5, it's like, oh, fucking please, football gods, let this guy find the end zone. Otherwise, I'm going to be very disappointed. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you didn't enjoy today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video to help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out one of the videos on the screen if you haven't seen them already. As always, good boy!